All right, cool. So Facebook, you got the Zoom link. Please feel free to join us on Zoom. If you don't got the Zoom link, just check my Facebook page and go to the events post, the second post behind this post. So the link is there. I'm hoping that folks will join us and get involved in the group conversation. This conversation today is a celebration of 420, a celebration of herbs and their power and their spirit, and how important they are to us, to all living things, how they support us and how they heal us, and how they have basically sculpted us, sculpted our societies, sculpted our bodies, sculpted and designed so much of who we are, plants. Let's see. All right. Alex is posting on the live broadcast how to get in touch with Zoom right here. So that should be helpful, right, Alex? On Facebook Live. Yeah, we're on. So herbs in Yoruba culture are represented by the herbal angel Ozion. Ozion is the medicine pot, the herbalist medicine pot. And it sits on top of Osun, the staff of health, the staff of wellness. Ozion is the intelligence of herbs. Herbs are the first life, and you can see all of the other expressions of life as different arguments in reflection on the choices that plants made. Life began according to observational evidence and contemporary scientific intuition. I'd like to, but basically life began as single cell animals. The earliest single cell animals were geocentric. They fed off of the heat and the minerals of the volcanic openings at the bottom of the sea, where the lava meets the pressurized cold water. In that environment, toxic to most life that we know of now, was where the first life really percolated, really came into being. And it was a persistent chemical reaction, a chemical reaction that replicated itself. And as far as I understand the scientific ideas that we have right now, this group of molecules, these atoms dancing together, doing these exchanges of electrons, exchanges of electromagnetic energy as they pass each other, creating a process that feeds off of the heat in that specific environment, feeds off of the heat and the minerals in that environment to create a process that is so complex and so full of chemical information that the process was able to replicate itself. This chemical replication, this chemical repeated replication of molecules that operate more like nanomachines than just regular chemicals. This was not a blind chemical reaction. These atoms and these molecules they created persistently reproduced themselves and persistently went through the cycle of life of being reproduced and then dying. These early characteristics, reproduction, dying, they were the first contracts, the first arguments as to what are the fundamental issues of life. And all of us have inherited those arguments from the time they were formed. And there has not been any contract similar. All life on Earth either descended from that particular contract that started 4 billion years ago. Nobody knows how the first cell started, but it was a contract and it was specific and it was unique, and we're all descended from it. And it was a contract amongst molecules that you gotta say had self-determination, molecules that knew they could not maintain themselves in the environment in which they were created, but also knew that they could write the story, write the plan for how they got organized in that particular chemical reaction and reproduce it. So that even though those particular molecules were going to be ripped apart and wouldn't survive long, they would persist generation after generation, constantly reproducing themselves, constantly deteriorating and being unrecognizable, only to have their parts reconsumed by the next generation, creating those same nano machines working in the same way. Well, not the same way. I mean, like I keep, that Mark Twain quote that I swear he might have gotten from one of the slaves he was talking to. But there's a quote attributed to him that says, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And these characteristics in the plant life, they repeat themselves, but not exactly. They repeat themselves uniquely, differently, improvisationally, on the same theme from the first cell to our huge global system of life today. And all of this was created because each particular thing was doing what it prefers to do in the environment it was created to do it. The first life was not able to travel around the world. It had to stay in one specific environment, one specific temperature range, one specific environment, the bottom of the ocean, the lava. However, it wanted to spread. And I've told you in Yoruba culture, Ile Ife, which is the civilization of life itself, translates as spreading love. And that's what life is. Life is a spreading love given from one generation of life to the next generation of life. The whole reason why we replicate is because what we are experiencing is so good, is so loving, is so graceful that we want to share it with a generation of folks that we may not even know. And that's written into the contract of life. That's in our very DNA. That's what DNA does. And it was all gifted to us by these first pyro single cell animals. And then what was the next development? those animals wanted to spread out of that environment, but to spread out of that environment meant to give up the energy and minerals, the security of basically the earth's womb, you know? And instead they had to find another tit to suck on other than the earth, another mother to nourish them other than the earth and the hot lava and the cool ocean. Aganju and Yemaja, the two Orisha that provided the environment in which all life began. But life wanted to move out of that environment, and it did. It found a new energy source, the sun itself. And that's when the first plants wrote their contract into life. And their contract to me is the most powerful contract that life has. Their contract was to use nothing more than the rays of the sun to create every bit of the life system that we all enjoy today. Those plants, when they first began consuming the sun, the earth was poisonous to the life that we are now. We would never be able to live in this atmosphere if it wasn't engineered or, sculpted, changed, chemically altered by generations of plants producing oxygen and consuming the sun. And also written into that contract was the idea of sleep, the idea of light over darkness. These plants, they sought light. They wanted to always be in a place where they could feel the heat of the sun, their sustenance, their food. And at night, when the sun wasn't available, they had to flip into a whole different chemical mindset, a whole different way of being. And instead of creating energy from oxygen, they instead created energy by creating carbon dioxide. And I feel that these two chemical ways of making a living were so different that their process of consuming oxygen during the day and carbohydrate at night wrote into us all, even though we no longer need the sun. It wrote into us all this concept of sleep, this concept of sleeping at night, being in a different state for half the day and a different state for the other half of the day. The sleep state, which all life after plants expresses, is part of what plants went through chemically. And I have to assume that the dreams we have, the repair to our body that occurs, the healing that occurs at night, these are all very much what the plants experienced when they stopped producing oxygen and switched over to producing carbon monoxide. I tell you, the characteristics that different forms of life express are directly related to arguments, real arguments that still exist in our culture today. Vegetarians are very concerned about eating something that could easily be just like them. We all get squeamish in our culture with the concept of cannibalism. But our history, when you look at the history of life itself, you can see that there was that moment, that time in which this argument began. There was that time when the first plant, the first oxygen breathing, sun eating plant decided to It's too much energy for the sun. I can't get to the sun. I've been pushed down in the ocean and it's too cold, it's too hot for me to do what I've got to do, but I want to live. And that first plant ate another plant, consumed it, pulled it in, made its parts itself. For the first time, eating something that wasn't given to it by the angelic Aganju, the lava of the deep ocean, the volcano, wasn't given to it by Yemoja, the waters and its minerals and its coolness against that lava's heat, nourishing the first cells with nothing else but chemical and temperature energy. Nah, then you have the plants that nourish themselves just off the sun. Then you have these cells that decide we'll eat the ones that feed off the angels. We'll eat our peers. And that's how all of us began, how insects began, how all of us, we're all descended from the cells that chose cannibalism, the cells that chose to eat their own rather than make do with the energy they were getting from the sun or from the earth. So it's in our very nature to eat what we are, to eat what we're related to eat part of the family tree we all belong on. But it is also part of our nature to have issues about it. And, for me, a lot of vegetarians, they look and they say, I'm not causing suffering by eating plants. But plants, we are descended from plants. Plants are just as emotional as us. Plants experience pain. We inherited all these characteristics from plants. When scientists right now are recognizing that plants, unlike us, they don't speak through vibrating the air. Plants speak through the molecules they release into the air. Those molecules are really only understood, scientists are recognizing that the molecules don't fit into a lock and key, and each molecule has a different taste, a different meaning because it's being recognized specifically. They're recognizing that plants and all of us, we all descended from plants, we all are able to sense these molecules because of how they sound, because of the vibration they have, because of how they resonate when they come into contact with our sensing organs. And all of that was descended from plants. Plants were sensing each other's chemical discharges, and those chemical discharges had meaning to the plants because the plants knew what it took to create those molecules. We all, at least I know, when I was growing up, when I was in high school in the suburbs, I used to love the smell of cut grass. But the smell of cut grass is actually a whole bunch of plants all screaming in unison about being physically abused, about being shredded and cut and hurt. We take their screams of pain as a pleasant smell. That's how far removed we are from the emotional expression of the life that makes us all possible. So, to be a vegetarian, unfortunately, is to me the moral equivalent of being a carnivore. In order to survive, you will have to make something else you're related to suffer. You have to kill something else you're related to. You can't just wait for it to die. You got to go and kill it and eat its living body, eat its living tissue in order for you to exist. That's the contract our ancestors wrote. And we wrote that contract because the plants served us like that. Think about it. The first plants, their problem was that they were floating in the ocean. They couldn't stay fixed and take in the sun. At one point, they'd be up at the surface of the ocean where they could take in sunlight and be well fed. But at other times, they could sink and be too far away from the sunlight to develop and to reproduce. So the first thing plants wanted to do was to be rooted, was to find a place in this endlessly moving environment which they could call home, which they could set up shop, which they could build on generation after generation, always being close to the sun, always close to their meal, and safe from being moved around in the ocean to environments that were too hot or too cold or too dark. So you have corals. That's what corals are. Corals are those early plant lives grabbing onto a rock, and because that rock was in the right place with the right temperature, with the right sunlight, they were able to set up a colony and grow. Of course, today you have the fish that eat that coral, just like we eat the fruits off the trees. And just like those fish, the coral is responsible for the whole community of diverse life around it. Just like the trees are responsible for the whole community of diverse life on the land. And we're part of that life. Yeah, I feel that plants are intelligent. I feel that plants communicate with us chemically. I feel that plants not only sustain us, they're not only necessary for us to live, but plants also introduce us chemically to mindsets and perspectives on life that we would never have if we just ate them to sustain ourselves. Plants get us high. And when we get high, those are not drugs, those are not chemicals. Those are our ancestors. Those are our long lost relatives trying to communicate with us and express a different way of looking at life, which can be medicinal. Not everybody should do drugs, but anybody that wants to do drugs should be able to do drugs because drugs do have a positive effect on people. No, it won't lengthen your life. And no, it won't make you a better driver. In fact, you shouldn't drive a car if you're going to do drugs. But from alcohol to marijuana to cocaine to heroin, we've all seen in our community people who have developed habits around these drugs, having cultural insights and spiritual insights that no one else in the community seems to be able to have. That's a medicine. You know what I'm saying? So this is 420. On 420, we like to celebrate our freedom to smoke the herb that our founding fathers used to grow. Hemp. George Washington grew hemp. We all grew up with ancestrally with some sort of cannabis. Every culture seems to have had a history with cannabis. You know, granted, it didn't become a big part of consumption in European cultural tradition, but there was cannabis in Europe. So who knows? Maybe there was a time when it was smoked or used as food or used as tea. But in any case, I myself, I think of marijuana, I think of alcohol, and I think of tobacco as holy herbs Now, there's a lot of herbs that I think are holy, like, for instance, spinach and basil. You know, these are holy herbs. They represent Orisha, they represent the angels, you know. I mean, Oshun is basil. She's lemonade. She's the lemons. She's that bitterness that it takes honey to sweeten. And once the honey sweetens it, all of society loves it, even though it originated as bitterness. You know what I'm saying? That's Oshun. Oshun takes her bitter life and sweetens it and sweetens herself till the bitterness becomes what people are actually attracted to, you know? And all of that has to do with plants and our relationship with plants. The fact that we find lemons bitter, the fact that we can't have lemons without bees pollinating the trees, the fact that those bees make themselves part of the sexual expression, the reproductive system of the plants, and are rewarded with pollen that they then produce this beautiful sugar from. And we now are able, through farming, to take advantage of all of these ancient relationships, the bees and the flowers and the pollen and the honey, all of these ancient relationships. We develop our own relationship within those ancient relationships. And the thing about a relationship is you could perceive one person as being in control, you could perceive another person as being in control. But truthfully, when you look at a relationship objectively, the two are not controlling each other. They are one system working together. You would not, at least I wouldn't say, that my brain controls my body. My body is working together with my brain to create me and to create everything I experience. And just like that, all of the expressions of life are working together to create something. And I feel that plants make it really clear from the start what our goal is. Our goal is the same goal that the singularity that started time and space itself had. And that goal is to spread love, is to reproduce and expand, is to constantly push into the places that we can only see. When I think about the incredible inflation of the singularity, I can't help but think about the incredible inflation of a seed. I can't help but think about the incredible inflation of an insect egg. I can't help but think about the incredible inflation of every origin of life. How yeast, from one yeast, can exponentially grow into a whole culture. This spreading is more complicated than fire. Fire spreads, it has that passion. But this spreading is a spreading of reproduction. This spreading is a spreading of unique individuals that are born small and develop into a storm. And that storm, well, sexually, meets another storm to create a mix of storms that starts off as small and as meek, and over time will develop into the great storms its parents was once its parents have moved on. This is the story of life. This is the contract that is absolutely clear in every expression life has ever expressed itself through. And no, there's nothing in the contract that says survival of the fittest. There's nothing in the contract that says only the best will survive. There's nothing in the contract that says one expression of life is better than another expression of life. The contract really, really asks for how many different ways can we reproduce ourselves? How many different ways can we be ourselves and survive in this world? It isn't about who is the best at surviving. It isn't about who's the worst at surviving. It isn't about who enjoys themselves the most and kills others. It isn't about who enjoys themselves the least or has never killed anyone. It is only about being able to survive within the context of life in your own unique way. And diversity seems to be the most prevalent value that life expresses. We are not born from purity. We are born from endless mutts, endlessly diversifying themselves, endlessly trying to be different, while always, in my opinion, expressing perfection, no matter how deeply they change that perfection from the way it was expressed by their forefathers. So you see where I'm going with this. I'm open. You know, I got some people here. I'm not looking at, oh, thank you very much, Rebecca Petrie. Amazing. That's a nice compliment. But you know, I'm open to conversation. I see a bunch of folks are logged on Zoom. Please feel free to unmute. I appreciate you being mute, you know, while I'm talking, but you know, unmute, join the conversation. It's a group conversation. We try not to speak over each other too much. We try to keep it clear, but I really do want people to participate by commenting, asking questions, giving their own opinions and their own experiences, their own feelings about plants and the importance of plants to our very existence, and the philosophical and conceptual and cultural ideas that you might be able to glean from the very factual way in which plants express themselves. You know what I'm saying? Please, I'm very open to what folks have to say or think while I light up this tobacco and marijuana. I love reefer because it makes me refer to all good God's creation. It is a sacrament. It is my religious belief that I am in communion with this plant and tobacco too.
What up, Soul?
Picking up. Hey, what's up? How you feel, Jordan?
Great. Happy 420.
Big up. I love 420.
Me too.
420.
So, my friend Jordan, you have anything that you want to add? Any questions? Any
I just
insights,
popped in.
comments?
I know you're gonna be talking about plants. I'm looking forward to that. We had a good conversation. That was just yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm.
About plants.
Yeah, what did you think of that?
I thought that was really interesting, thinking about them as ancestors, and this innate ability to look to the light, to seek light without eyes, but once I don't know. I mean, you said
Yeah, I
it
was
beautifully.
talking to Jordan yesterday. I was talking about Obatala and how Obatala's contract started with plants. Obatala is the light. And at first, plants only needed the light to live. But as a result, the light was all important. It was so much better, so much more supreme than the darkness. And it was written right into them, this idea. You know, plants could operate in the dark, but at night, like I said, they had to go into a completely different chemical production system. During the day, they strove, they moved, they rooted themselves in places where they could get to light. And light was the most important thing. And then eventually, the ones that couldn't get to the light or just decided that they wanted to consume what was consuming the light. They wanted to consume their relatives. When they started consuming their relatives, it was the light that showed them where their relatives were, how to consume them, where to consume them. Our earliest ancestors, one of the few physical characteristics that we share with them, one of the few physical characteristics we share with the very earliest multi-cell animals that we are descended from, is the characteristic of having two eyes and a head. Those eyes were to be able to see our food, be able to see what's out there. So even though the light stopped becoming our means of nourishment, without the light, there was no means of nourishing ourselves. Without the light, there was no means of making sure that we didn't end up being someone else's nourishment. So our whole concept of racism, of a persistent preference for white, a persistent preference for light over darkness, is part of that contractual behavior, going all the way back to when the first multi-cell animals started eating multi-cell animals. I feel that as you get to know Obatala, because when the Yoruba were talking about Obatala, they only knew of it as visible light. The white light is all we can see. But now we know that the white light is much more than we can see. And that no matter where you go or what you do, light is shining. There is no real such thing as darkness. We are beings of light, glowing in infrared light, with white noise, static, the relic radiation of the development of time and space itself, permeating all of us, making us constantly exist in a field of light that there are frequencies that completely are absorbed by us. There are frequencies that run right through us and don't even recognize us. And then there's the frequencies that we see. that reflect off of us. In this way, hopefully, we can recognize that although our experiential contract, our ancestral contract, our historical contract, that is not only written in our epigenetic DNA, but I'm sure is hard-coded into the basic construction of our DNA. This preference for light, this hatred, this fear, this repulsion to darkness. But I mean, you know, I can't say that the opposite hasn't been true as well. You know, you see other animals and they all have different relationships with light. Just the way we are repulsed to fear darkness and go through great lengths to create tools that make light at night for us. We see insects that don't feel comfortable in the light, that when it comes on the light, they're running towards the darkness, that the darkness is what they prefer. And it's interesting that those very same insects in our culture are considered nasty, or considered repulsive. You know what I'm saying? All I'm trying to say is that when I look at science, when I look at nature, when I look at the characteristics that everything around us expresses, I see them as arguments about our nature, about who we are, about our culture as a people, you know, arguments that we faced and the results of other species that face those arguments as well. And to me, plants faced the deepest argument. What happens when all of your children, what happens when all of the life you've produced relies on killing you to live, relies on eating you to live? Well, just like Africans brought into the Americas, plants decided to serve what was eating them, serve what was abusing them. Now, this didn't start off at first lightly. You know, there are plants out there that are still at war with insects that eat them, creating all types of toxins to try to keep the insects from eating them. But then there's other plants that use the insect's hunger to basically make the insect a tool of reproduction, like I said with bees. You know? In any case, there's a certain logic to the way I'm talking about these scientific issues. And, you know, it's really the logic that I'm trying to share more than any specific interpretation I'm making. Our ancestors created parables, they created fables, myths, they created narratives that tried to explain the world that they observed around them. Whether you talk the Bible, or whether you talk about the writings of Buddha, or the Yoruba belief system, or the Mayan belief system, all of these cultures produced stories that were arguments as to why things happen the way they happen, that were arguments about what it is that we're perceiving, what it is we're observing, and why it's happening, and what we should do about it, and what we should feel about it.
So that idea of the plant serving the consumer of the plant, that's an interesting concept that I don't know, sounds very Yoruban.
Yeah, well, you know, I tell you, from my perspective, it isn't just a very Yoruba concept. It's very Western Central African. the more I studied Yoruba culture and other Western Central African cultures, the more I see a commonality about this issue of 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 God, and how, not just God, reality, and how reality is a good thing. And you know, like I've said before, in the African American community, you have it's all good. You have God is good all the time. These are sayings that people really energetically believe, and I feel that they are African retention of of an attitude about reality, where um, you love reality unconditionally, and part of that is loving who you are and loving your character, regardless of how others act. I often think about the intense pain that so many African men and women went through on plantations, caring and loving for their masters like family, while their masters treated them like possessions, while their masters fed off of their lives. Nonetheless, they would serve these masters, and not only serve them, but serve them in such a way that the masters would trust them with their children. I mean, I can't imagine giving my child to be taken care of by a woman, having her breastfeed my child, having her care for my child, even though I know that I have sold her children into slavery and I will sell her children into slavery. From my perspective, these women were doing Oshun's strategy. These men who would be whipped to the point of passing out and decide not to go kamikaze, not to go suicidal in an attempt to just hurt as many white men as possible, to me speaks about a character that would be more willing to serve a murderer than become a murderer, more willing to love an abuser rather than become an abuser, more willing to raise a child with love, even though their own children are raised with hate. Yemoja, Yemoja is the Orisha of the ocean, but she's also the Orisha of rules and regulations. Rules and regulations. And I tell you, that's because life developed its rules and regulations in the oceans. The characteristics that we had in the oceans are what we pulled up with us onto the land. And those rules and regulations are the very morality that we have woven into our souls. And I'm saying that there was a cultural morality in Western Central Africa that was very different than the cultural morality that existed in Europe. That, yes, Western Central Africans engaged themselves in slavery, but that slavery was never based on the idea that the slave was not human. And it wasn't based on the idea that anyone could be kept a slave. Now, don't get me wrong, there are people who went through generations of slavery in Africa. It did go down. You know, unfortunately, caste systems are very difficult. but there was a mobility in West and Central Africa that you did not see in European culture or in the slave trade of the Americas. Of course, in the early trade, you had this issue where people would be indentured, or you could buy your way out of slavery, and there were blacks in early United States that bought their way out of slavery and bought African American slaves and had all the privileges of a European American, a landowning European American, but they were African. But eventually, what happened in America and what happened with European supremacy was specifically taking the genetic trait of dark skin and saying that that specifically denied your humanity. In Africa, you have kingdoms where it was recorded through the oral tradition that the king's slave, from time to time, the king's slave would become the next king. That is a type of slavery that wasn't going on by the time George Washington became president. By the time George Washington became president, they made it legally impossible for any of George Washington's black slaves to ever become president. So, yes, there was slavery in West Africa. Yes, there was a caste system. Yes, there was supremacy. But that supremacy was not based on your birth. It was based on your culture, your position, what people needed from you. The reason why the king's first slave would become the king in certain situations in the Yoruba culture was because the king's first slave was trusted by the king and was the only one that was around the king and helping the king and knew all of the situations that the king was involved in. So literally nobody else but this slave could do the job of that king. You know what I'm saying? Now, we had situations with that kind of trust in early American, early United States culture, you know, like Benjamin Banneker, you know, who laid out Washington, D.C. But nonetheless, he was still treated as less than human, still disenfranchised, just based on the color of his skin. Now, it's a very complicated issue, and it's more complicated when you look around the globe. The issue of racism, like I said, there are some, you know, particularly contemporary issues like, you know, us being not considered human during 19th century pseudoscience. But then there's much older situations like, you know, the first expansion out of Africa 50,000 years ago, which populated the whole Pacific, and now they feel North and South America, the Americas all together, with a group of people who looked like I look. Humanity is African, but the first people to get all the way around the globe, according to contemporary, according to contemporary science, is the people who.
It's not greasy. I like how it's not greasy. I love how.
Oh, somebody has a comment. Somebody has something to share.
Hello.
Please, once again, anybody who wants to break in to this long monologue of mine, I'm very open to going off on tangents, talking about insights, exchanging experiences. You know what I'm saying? Hey, what's up? How you doing, Courtney?
Nice.
Hey, sorry, I was on mute.
Yeah, no, that's polite. If you ain't got nothing to say, you might as well be on mute, right?
Soul wants everyone off of mute.
No, you can stay on mute.
Okay.
If you have a comment or a question, please come off of mute and get involved in the conversation. But other than that, you know, I can understand being on mute. You know, you're helping other people be able to communicate. But plants, all right, Ozine. Let me tell you the pataki of Ozine. Ozine was a herbalist that came into the Yoruba community and opened up shop. He knew herbs. He would go out into the forest and the birds would tell him what the herbs were and what they would help with. He would learn from the birds, learn from the forest. And in his shop, when people came in and had any type of ailment, he would call on this bird spirit, and the bird spirit would tell him which herbs to give that person. And the herbs he gave people healed them. They completely took the issues that the people were complaining about away. These healing herbs became so popular that people stopped going to the other priests of the other angels for help. People stopped going to Oshun, people stopped going to Obatala, and were just going to Ozine to get the herbs that helped so quickly. Well, all the other angels felt jealous with all these people not going to them anymore and only going to Ozine. And their jealousy, their wicked eye, the weight of their judgment, the weight of their wishes that Ozine would not be successful, the weight of their want for the success he had became so tremendous that his house, his shop collapsed on him. In his shop, when people came in and had any type of ailment, he would call on this bird spirit. Basically, somebody's got on mute. Basically, the house fell on him, and he survived the house collapsing on him. But as a result, he lost one eye, one ear, one arm, and one leg. However, he was so good with herbs that he was able to heal. And he went around the forest with only one leg, hopping around, and only one arm, and only one eye. And he would hop around and pick herbs and bring them and continue doing his work. Now, that story of Ozine, first of all, it's healer, heal thyself, you know, but also that story of Ozine is a story of how the community, how even though you are doing something constructive and helpful for your community, how the community can still heap negativity on you. And how important it is that you are able to survive that negativity. And that your survival of that negativity is in fact a blessing. Let me share a song for you about Ozine. The song goes, Ozine awa niye, tiwi tiwi elagba diye ra, sa kere kere moye moye, Eleze Kemo Yeleze, Omoruba Wamara, Loco Lona, Bobo Ewe Ajuba. That means that the owner of the medicine pot, we have survived. This is Africans thanking the herbal Orisha for the herbs that helped them to survive slavery. It is through the herbs that you provide that we have survived. Oh, herb man that walks faster on one leg than other people walk on two. It is through your herbs that we survive. The owner of the miraculous pot of herbs. Herbs of the farm and herbs of the forest. We salute you. I say, Omo Ozan, it is the herbs that are the meal of Ozan, of the children of Ozan. And in many of the songs for Ozan, they talk about how him losing an arm, how him losing a leg made him stronger, made him faster than other people. So this idea that the hate, the harm, the negativity that other people put on you will actually be a blessing for you, will actually make you stronger, better, will actually give you something you couldn't have without those negative, hateful feelings, without those curses, you would not have received your blessings. And that's a mindset. It's not, and I gotta really stress this, it isn't about optimism. It isn't an optimistic mindset. It's a philosophy about the very nature of reality. It's not looking at reality through rose-colored glasses. You know what I'm saying? There were many a slave that from their birth to their death never got socially rewarded and only found negative curse heaped upon negative curse upon them, no matter how constructive, no matter how much they helped and loved the society they grew up in. But what I am saying is that their attitude of feeling blessed by all that negativity, their attitude of recognizing that they were valuable and that part of their value comes from their resilience and ability to overcome the negativity that they had to live through every day. So in this way, it isn't optimism, it isn't blind optimism. What it really is a celebration of everything as being a potential gift. I want to go and make that concept a little clearer with another Yoruba thing. The Yoruba will talk about when they say someone curses you, that they blow on you, right? They've blown on you because they want something negative happen to you. Muddy Waters would say, she's a good woman, but she has killing me on her mind all time. And to think about killing me is just the same as killing me. These negative kinds of feelings that we all throw at each other all the time. From a Yoruba point of view, what happens is that blow, that negative curse, that use of ache to make somebody feel pain or loss is actually ends up being a blessing for that person and a curse upon the person who put it on them, if that person is rewarded by your curse.
It sounds like a military technique also.
It is a military technique.
Like Aikido.
Yeah, this is so school for culture soldiers. I really feel we're all involved in a very powerful culture war. And that culture war predates humanity. That culture war predates life itself. And that culture war has sculpted everything that we experience, everything that we're involved in. And as a culture soldier, it is a martial discipline just to recognize the war that's going on. Now, don't get me wrong, you don't have to see it as a war. Instead of a culture soldier, you could be a culture sower, sowing the seeds, being a farmer. You know what I'm saying?
It could be just call and response.
Yeah, it could be just call and response if they're two. Yes, all of those relationships count. A hammer can be a tool, and it can be a weapon. A cold front could be described as just a cold breeze, but instead they call it a cold front because they recognize that the weather can be described like a war.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same thing. We are avant-garde culture soldiers. We are on the front line of cultural warfare, and I am trying to offer a different narrative than the narratives we're already familiar with within our culture. I feel that just by being able to pull narratives out of Western Central African culture as a culture soldier, you are diversifying and changing the very field of cultural engagement.
Was it Yemoja or Oshun that Ogun raped? And
Unfortunately, Ogun raped both Yemoja and Oshun, but their stories are very different. Ogun rapes Yemoja, and then Yemoja confronts Ogun about it, elicits empathy from Ogun for the pain and abuse he gave her, and then makes him work for all eternity, imposing her rules and regulations. Yemoja's rules and regulations have no meaning without them being enforced by Ogun. Whereas with Oshun, Oshun is Oshun uses her sexuality to disarm a violent patriarchal Ogun.
And she marries him, no?
Well, in some stories, in the story that I'm talking about, Ogun, and these stories are also called pataki. They're basically parables. They're ways of understanding the angels, very similar to how koans in Buddhism help you to understand Buddhist concepts. So Ogun is asked by his community to go to war with another community. So Ogun goes off and he starts fighting the other community. He starts fighting the other city. And he gets so caught up in the fight, so turned on by the bloodlust, so completely into the violence that he loses all sensibility and ends up turning on his own people after he's destroyed the other community. And now his own people are running from him, trying to control him, trying to sedate him, trying to get him to be social again. But he's so into the violence, he can't be stopped. Oshun says, I can stop him. And Oshun stops him by using her sexuality and using the sweet honey in a plate and the cool fan in the other hand, and her dance and her flirting and her sexuality as a means to cool Ogun, sedate Ogun, and really civilize Ogun, socialize Ogun, because Oshun is society. And it is only through Ogun being able to be social, that Oshun will allow him the sweetness. And when Ogun is having difficulty being social, Oshun gives him coolness with the fan. And what the fan represents is not just cool temperature, but the fan represents praise. Just like the head mambo would praise the master so that the master would be cool with the other slaves. You get what I'm saying? So yes, both Oshun and Yemoja are raped by Ogun, but they both use different strategies to mitigate that violence and that immorality. You know what I'm saying? And implicit in their strategies are the characteristics of the angels themselves. You know? There's a reason why Oshun is 5. There's a reason why Yemoja and Ogun are 7, are 8. It can vary.
Wait,
Anybody else?
Yemoja is 5?
No, Oshun is 5.
Oh, Shun is 5.
Yeah, like the 5 lines that make a pentagram, the symbol of a house, which is what Oshun is. She is society. She's a house. There's a pataki where Oshun weaves heads into families, and she weaves families into communities, and she weaves communities into countries, and she weaves countries into the world. You know what I mean? Oshun is the seamstress. Yemoja is the dyer. Yemoja is the indigo dyer. The indigo dyer that makes work clothes, Ogun's work clothes. So when you look at blue jeans are very much a Yemoja thing. Yemoja was making blue jeans back in Africa, work jeans. And what's interesting is that idea of cotton dyed in indigo being for work also is Japanese as well. And they have similar indigo dyed cottons as you see in traditional West African fabrics. And when you look at today's work jeans that we all wear, even though some of us aren't really working in them, with the shreds that you actually buy because you want to have the shreds, it looks very similar in color and conceptual cultural context as what West Africans were wearing in Yoruba land to work the fields. You know, there's a lot of aspects of contemporary American culture that are very Yoruba and very Congo. I think people would be surprised how much of European American culture has very little to do with European classical culture. Very many of the things that are very popular and even represent European American culture are very, very African. You know, you'll see a European American in Tennessee with a banjo calling square dancing and feeling that they are involved in their old time religion of white supremacy, of European culture. But actually, square dancing was the type of dance and song they did in the Oyo Empire's court. It is a religious dance of the Yoruba people. Square dancing is a dance where you have call and response, and the caller is calling for the community to make certain dance steps, and the community does the dance steps and responds to the caller. That is a format that is specifically classical African, just like the ballet is specifically classical European. But nonetheless, if you grow up in the States, you would think that it's a white thing to square dance and play the banjo. The banjo is an African instrument with an African name. These types of misunderstandings are possible because of the incredible ignorance around West and Central African culture and its history. So as a result, people don't even know what is European and what is African. They only know what is European and assume everything else Europeans do is European as well, because they don't know what Africans did other than wear loincloth and bang drums. You know what I'm saying? So that is part of the power of that I feel is available for European American culture soldiers who are willing to do the work and learn about cultures that they are specifically ignorant of, and ignorant of specifically because of European supremacy and the history we all came out of. You know, there's a reason why we all know who Buddha is. There's a reason why we all know who Confucius is. It's because European scholars went to Asian culture as an equal. They studied Asian culture like they could learn something from Asian culture. That did not happen with West and Central African culture. Sub-Saharan African culture was the realm of anthropologists. It was the realm of people who wanted to study how men acted before we became civilized. People who wanted to study an exotic, primitive people. People who wanted to study a people who had not developed yet so that they could understand how they developed into being European. That's why we talk about people as hunter-gatherer. Man, there isn't a culture on earth that isn't hunter-gatherer. I'm a hunter-gatherer. I go and hunt my food and gather my food. This idea that somehow you're taking a teleport back in time when you go and see people living on the savannah or people living in the rainforest, whether it's Amazon or Congo. You're not going back in time, and you're not looking at a culture that is less developed than your culture. You're looking in the mirror, and you have just as much to learn from those contemporaries as you have to learn from any other contemporaries. And if Europeans had had that attitude going around the world, just as many people who know about Buddha and Confucius would know about Ogun and Shango. But West and Central African culture was never academically respected. I had to learn the Greek Pantheon. I had to know who Hermes was, who Zeus was. It was easy for me to learn the Hindu pantheon. It was easy for me to find out who Krishna was, who Kali was. It's all part of our common cultural context. But somehow figures as important as Shango and Ogun are completely unknown in our community because of this difference of how Asian culture and even Native American culture was treated compared to Sub-Saharan African culture. The Beatles felt comfortable going to gurus in India and studying Indian culture and learning yoga. Tell me, who would have felt comfortable going to Benin and learning to be a witch doctor and learning about voodoo. Our culture has consistently had a supremacist view on West and Central African culture, that it has nothing to offer and that it is primitive and evil. And that association still is prevalent today, if in nothing else but our community's ignorance about West and Central African culture. But I mean, I'm going down that line really hard. I mean, look at how back then we criminalized cultures. Now we criminalize consumption. You know what I'm saying? Always with the bougie laws.
Can I speak?
Oh yeah, of course, please. Who's this?
I'm Valeria. I don't know what the subject is.
Hey, welcome, Valeria. Please welcome your questions, comments.
Hi, how are you?
insights. Anything you got to share with us, Valeria?
I just wanted to appreciate your sharing Shango and Ogun and Oshun. I studied African religions in college, so I really was fascinated by that worldview and noticed this in the New Age community, like, where are the African healers and teachers in these like healing centers? And
Real talk.
I thought that was definitely a form of discrimination like 20 years ago when I was, patronizing them. So I appreciate your sentiment. I did also read some of Malidoma Some's and Songofu Some's work. Are you familiar with them?
Oh no, I don't think so. Please.
They're really fascinating healer teachers from Burkina Faso, the tribe. And they moved to the US and have published a lot of books and lead workshops. Songomu, the wife, leads mostly workshops for women, and Malidoma Some wrote a book on water and on the healing message of water like 20 years ago. And, I thought it was really relevant to our times now as I'm remembering what I read, because he was prophesying the burnings of the forest and that our culture has too much fire and, we need to really reconnect with water. And now a lot of the indigenous communities here in the US are teaching us these water songs and ceremonies to help us recalibrate with the water element. And the COVID pandemic as well is bringing a lot of water into our lungs, which is related to the burning of the forest, the earth's lungs. So I feel like there's some sort of karmic earth synergy expression there, and through us. And I think just to bring it back to Burkina Faso and Malidoma Some, he's really fascinating because he grew up in the British culture, raised and educated there, but came back to his traditional homelands at age 19 and went through the rites of initiations at that age so that he was embedded in his culture and understand it, but it took him a little longer. He was a little slower at that age. But his name actually means, I think, something along the lines of like a bridge between cultures. And his life purpose, as his teachers taught him in Burkina Faso, was to bring the message of his tribe, the Dagara tribe, and the healing message of his people to the world. And he's been doing that. And he actually has appeared in a lot of the like New Age circuits and, done workshops, and probably one of the few. But, I'm always, I think the African worldview, we have a lot to learn from, and I love it. I also, do you know of, what's his name? I'm forgetting. John Lockley?
The name sounds familiar. Please.
He's also a Shangomo from Africa, from South Africa. He's also comes to the US often to lead workshops, but ironically, he's a white guy.
Yeah, I've never heard of him, honestly.
Yeah.
He's South African, you said, but a priest of Shango?
Yeah, he's not a priest of Shango. He's a Shangomo, which is their word for medicine man or woman.
Oh, I see. In what, the Zulu tradition?
I'm not exactly sure. Maybe that's it, if that's what's in South Africa. I went to one of his talks a long time ago and have been on his email and did a healing with him. But he does dress with that like white face paint and stripes and like, you know, that might be Zulu, I'm not sure. But what was fascinating about his story, and he made it very clear, was that when he was in college about over 20 years ago, he was studying psychology and he got really sick. And in his illness, he started having these prophetic dreams that were telling him to go to the barrios, and like he saw a corn of the cob on the ground, and his friend was like, you have to follow that dream. So they went and they like found a corn on the cob on the floor, and they like went into the barrios, which at that time apparently was illegal because they were segregated. And he found a teacher there, a Shangomo, a woman who was, you know, traditionally South African Black. And it was so controversial because he started telling her the dreams he had while he was sick for like 2 years. And she said to him, those dreams are only the kinds of dreams that come to Shangomos in our tradition. And I'm recognizing you as a Shangomo in training through these dreams, and I have to be your teacher. So he ended up being like this white guy in college, like sneaking into the barrios to learn from his teacher. And she was pissing everybody off in her community because he was a white guy and she was teaching him their medicine. But she was like, these are the dreams that only Shangomos get. Like, it's not up to me, it's up to the ancestors.
Well, these are real issues, Valeria. Before I comment on what you just shared with us, I heard someone request, I see someone requested on Facebook that you spell out the name of the two healers that you started speaking about.
Yeah.
Also, any reference to John Locke, you know, just to help people.
Sure.
So, I didn't know about any of these folks.
I could put it in the chat here. John Lockley, and he comes up to the Blue Deer Center in upstate New York, where I've seen him. So I'll put that in there. As well as Malidoma Some and Sangomo Some. Let me make sure I get their names spelled.
How do you spell Sango?
Hold on. I'm pretty sure this is how you spell John Lockley, because it's
all right.
Malidoma
while you're
Some,
doing
I remember.
that, I'm sorry, go on.
Malidoma Some is pretty easy to, let me Google it.
All right. While you're getting that, I'm going to talk about. You brought up so many different issues, you know, all really deep and really complicated. All right. Wow. All right. So the healing power of water. Water is a very, very deep, powerful material in Yoruba and in Congo culture, and in just about every African culture I've studied. You know, sub-Saharan African culture I've studied. Water is the magic of life itself. All of the Orisha live in water in some form or another. All spirits move through water in some form or another. Water is the key component of our environment, and scientifically we know now that, you know, where there's water, there's the possibility to build life. The main prayer in Yoruba culture, the prayer that most Yorubas do all the time, goes like this: Omi tutu, Ona tutu, Ile tutu, tutu laroe, tutu egun, tutu ona, tutu ile. Kosi aru, kosi efo, kosi adina, kosi akobo, kosi fitibo, aiku babawa. That means cool water to cool the road, cool water to cool the owner of talkativeness, cool water to cool the earth, cool water to cool the house, cool water to cool the street, so that there is loss no more, so that there is disease no more, so that there is pain no more, so that there is suffering no more, so that there is unforeseeable problems no more. The Yoruba, this prayer is part of the Yoruba's fear of what they call bona bona, the hot earth. The hot earth is climate change. Babluaye is the Orisha of the hot earth. Babluaye is the viral angel, and it represents our greed, our hunger, our need to mine the earth, to farm the earth, to pull the riches and pull our food from the earth, and how that is disruptive to the earth. Even before we started burning fossil fuels, West Africans realized that our greeds and our need to rape the earth was going to make the earth get hotter, make the earth get a fever, and treat us like an illness that we do to a virus what we are doing to what the earth does to us when we rape it and burn and mine and are focused on our own greed. And as a result, just like the fever the earth gets, we get the fever, but we also get the pustules on our skin that are like the seeds, the grain that we farm from the earth. And these pustules, we hope we can survive the hot earth till these pustules pop like popcorn. That's why popcorn is a sacrificial gift to Babluaye. And that's why we eat popcorn as we watch our viral videos. Basically, Babluaye is, I like to look at African-American spirituals, and the spiritual, I've said this before in Soul School, the spiritual for Babluaye is he's got the whole world in his hands. And what is it that we're hoping he does with the world? We're hoping, instead of using his broom to spread the heat and make it hotter, to have a party with the hot earth and the death and the pestilence that can cause, or to cool the earth with water, to cool the hot earth by cooling the wounds with water. So maybe we will have to go through popping the corn, or maybe we can find a way to cool the disease without having to go through such a violent fever that could kill us. All I know is that my ancestors were very well aware of climate change and of the essential nature of water, the physical manifestation of the spirit of life itself, and how water was so much in control of the very temperature of the earth and the temperature of our bodies. Water is the great regulator that we must worship because it is what makes us possible. All right, then after water, you were talking about healing, and one of the biggest jokes about Western Central African culture is that it's witch doctors, and of course a witch doctor has no real valuable healing ability. Just recently we said, okay, if a witch doctor has any value as a true healer, it's just what you call it effect, with the placebo effect, right? So the only reason why anybody would go to a witch doctor is just because their very belief is going to make them get better. Other than that, you're just being a victim of a charlatan, a con artist, which is how voodoo priests and voodoo healers are often framed as con artists are superstitious people who have no factual way of offering you the true services that you're paying for. But it's been my experience that Western Central African culture has offered me personally, and also offered the United States, our culture, historically, rather important and powerful scientific insights. And, I've talked about how Bablu Aye developed the concept of inoculation, and how that vaccination, that concept, came out of the Western Central African experience of healing smallpox by vaccination that Europeans adopted eventually, and then also digital binary code, which has its roots also in Western Central African culture, that Europeans got from the Dogon. These types of contributions, I feel we don't know about them, and we don't know about the other contributions, and we don't know about the scientific saliency of many Western Central African belief systems, because they've been dismissed so completely by terms like witch doctor and voodoo doll and all of those really culturally oppressive descriptions. To me, our common popular cultural knowledge of West and Central African culture is the equivalent of someone's knowledge of Christian culture if all they ever saw was Dracula movies. If the only way you could understand Christian culture was to only see movies about Dracula, that's about how well people understand African traditional culture. So then you were talking about where the two healers you were referencing were from Burkina Faso. I know very little about the cultures of Burkina Faso. In fact, there are cultures in Nigeria, a country that I've studied really hard for 20 years. And there are cultures in Nigeria I've never even heard of. You know what I'm saying? Africa is incredibly complex and has a ridiculously diverse expression of languages and cultures, particularly in Sub-Saharan Africa, but all of Africa is the same way. All of humanity is the same way. I mean, when you look at Europe, you take a country like Spain, you still have 2 or 3 different distinct languages that are still alive in Spain. You know what I'm saying? And in Africa, you have nations like that. And just like you wouldn't call the Catalonians of Spain a tribe, you shouldn't really call West African cultures tribes either. There's so much in our language that is specifically the language of the colonizer, the language of the oppressor. There's no reason for the word tribe other than to make the distinction between uncivilized people and a civilized people. You would never use the word tribe in regards to a civilized culture, just like you would never use the word myth in regards to a currently practiced religion. You know, these words, myth, tribe, these are all words that were created by culture soldiers. Well, you know, I like to call them culture warriors because they were worried. They were worried about other cultures being seen as equal to theirs. They were worried about their children adopting other cultures. They were worried about their peers making arguments as to why other cultures are equal to theirs. They were worried about the supremacy of their beliefs and the supremacy of their religion. So as a result, they created words to distinguish their culture, their religion, their beliefs from all of the beliefs around them and all of the beliefs they came from. So we use the word myth because the once strong Roman Empire that believed very deeply in Zeus turned and embraced Christianity, an upstart spiritual religion that did not acknowledge the gods that were so deeply treasured by the Romans. So in order to distinguish themselves from the Roman Empire, they had to take their most valuable cultural possessions and dismiss them as myths while embracing the Bible as the truth. And now today, if you were to call the Bible a myth, people would get upset with you. But the fact of the matter is, it's just like the Roman Empire moved away from Zeus. Most people have moved away from looking at the Bible as a history and scientific record of reality. You know what I'm saying?
So I have a question.
Yeah, I'm open, Jill, please.
This moving from like the belief in Zeus would have been as equal to the belief in Jesus and now this God. That transition probably wouldn't have been a very easy one. Like it went from Zeus to Christianity, but I would imagine there would have been a lot of struggle during that time. And now, like the Bible being taken as reality, and now we're having, I am at least, and other people I know, kind of questioning what like that as reality, as a final word, like it had really happened as it was written. I took a course where we studied the Bible as a piece of literature. So these transitions, I don't know if the transition from Christianity into other beliefs is happening maybe slowly and not with a lot of wars over it. Maybe there are wars that are for other things, but maybe it's actually about that. So I was just wondering how you just mentioned that transition, but it seemed like it would have been more of a struggle of a transition. No?
It's a culture war. And unfortunately, culture war is always the reason for organized war.
Okay.
So the whole rationale for organized violence is almost always associated with a cultural perspective. And that cultural perspective that drives us towards violence is almost always associated with some sort of supremacist perspective, whether that be that the people we are fighting leave us no choice but to be violent with them because they can't reason, or because all they want is to kill us, or because they worship something that is evil. They embrace something that we know is wrong. They are not practicing the discipline that we feel all humans must practice. These types of arguments are culture soldier arguments. These types of arguments have no basis in reality. However, they are real because people really die over these types of arguments. That's why, unlike our president, I don't think anything is fake. I recognize all stories as being the truth. I am not interested in finding the one truth and saying everything else is a lie, so therefore unimportant, so therefore something I shouldn't look at or pay attention to. That is a ridiculous frame of mind. The fact of the matter is that there is no such thing as a lie. Information only means something in context, and in context, it always means something. Even when you say a lie, in the context of who you are and what you're trying to do and what you think the lie is going to do for you, you are telling a greater truth than if you simply told the truth. In context, every single time Trump goes against common consensus, he is telling the truth about who he is, what stories he dismisses, what stories he feels are not worthy of his scrutiny. You know? He basically edits reality down to what he wants it to be. And he shows us what he wants it to be by the way in which he edits reality down. I definitely agree with Trump. I'm ready to die over this virus. I've always been ready to die. Shit, since I was 11 years old, I've been of the firm belief that my country has been trying to kill me. And when you look statistically at the kids I grew up with, that belief wasn't necessarily so misplaced. Very few of the kids I grew up with are alive today. And a whole bunch are dying right now. But nonetheless, I'm willing to die. I've always been willing to die. The only thing I really know I have to do in this world is die. However, I have enough respect for my community and for people who are not willing to take the risks that I'm taking. I have enough respect to say, okay, I'll throw on a mask. I'll put on gloves. Just out of social etiquette. It has nothing to do with what the truth is. It has to do with my respect for my community. You know what I'm saying? It has nothing to do with me being afraid to die or me being ready to die. It has to do with me accepting the fact that for some people in my community, wearing a mask and wearing gloves will truthfully make them feel like I am concerned about the length that they live on this world. Well, if that's all I got to do, shit, I'd be happy to put on gloves, wear a mask, and participate in this hope that we will all avoid this virus. But I'm a child of Bob Luayet. To be really honest with you, if I caught the virus, I would feel blessed. And hopefully, I would be able to survive my initiation. So like my angel that walks faster on one leg than on two, I can sing, I have survived at the foot of Osiris. You know what I'm saying, folks? It's getting dark up in here. Let me see if I can turn on the light. Anybody got anything to say? Any comments, questions, issues?
Soul. Hey, Soul.
Yeah, what's up? What's up?
I got a question.
Big up, Hope.
Hey, man. Hi.
Hope of Grace Exhibition Space, y'all.
I'm
Yes,
like
Hope.
squeezing down in a little ball on the floor so my phone can catch me. Hey, you, when in class in Gray Space a while back, you mentioned the name of a professor at Yale and some books that he wrote, and I've been wanting to order and read them.
Oh yeah, sure. That's Robert Farris Thompson.
Robert-
Farris. Robert Farris Thompson. THOMP.
Yep, regular Thompson.
Yep. And
With T?
the book you should start with, which most sub-Saharan African art history classes, it's required reading. It's called Flash of the Spirit. It's a very academic, very thick book. Very difficult to read if you're not used to academic texts and whatnot.
Is there a layman's version that he wrote?
That is the layman's version, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Then there's another author that's required reading in Robert Farris Thompson's class. In his graduate class at Yale, the author that's required reading is John Mason, who is also my godfather.
John, oh, right.
Yeah, he's the guy that initiated me into African traditional culture.
What's a good book? What's a good book by him?
And the first book you should pick up that he wrote is by it's a book called The Black Gods.
Orisa.
Okay.
It's backwards, huh?
No.
Oh, okay, for you.
The Black Gods, a study of New World Orisha. I'm gonna.
You know what? So the card that I picked up to write this stuff down on is your sister's business card.
Look at that. It's Kismet.
Right? Is hers, that's Amma?
Amma, yes, exactly. Yeah. Amma means the breath of life in Yoruba.
Oh, right on.
God's breath.
Cool.
Her whole name's Amma Ife.
She calls herself Amma Birch.
Yeah, that's her last name. Ife is her middle name. Amma Ife, which means God's breath spreads. Shout out, Amma.
Thank you, Soul. But that's my big question.
Yeah, I actually emailed Jill a 2-book reading list for Soul School. So we're gonna get that out so that people can at least easily find those 2 books. I might also include Thompson's books. I just didn't because Thompson's book is a bit more difficult reading and it's a bit longer. But I guess I should let people have the option.
Okay.
So Amma is God in Pale Fox and Dogon.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was going to say when I was talking about the diversity of West and Central African culture. It's just like the diversity of European culture. Yes, there are many different languages, and yes, there are many different beliefs and many different ways of being, but there's a commonality to all the cultures of Europe, particularly of Southern Europe and particularly of Northern Europe. They all have a certain commonality. In West and Central Africa, you see the similar commonality. West African cultures have common words, common concepts, common ideas. Central African cultures have common words, common concepts, common ideas. And even though things can be very different, so different that one speaker can't understand another speaker, just like a Spanish person and an English person, just like a Spanish person and an English-speaking person, they both know Shakespeare and they both know the Man of La Mancha. You know what I'm saying? Because there is that deep cross-cultural and common cultural origin.
And probably also Greek mythology and of course Christianity. Right?
Yeah, with West African culture, you don't see because at no point did one West African empire rule the entirety of West Africa. As far as the Oyo Empire went, it still didn't get up into where the Songye Empire was, or the Moors were even further north. You know, so you have you don't. Islam never came deeply into Nigeria either. I mean, you do have Muslim communities in Nigeria, but it seems that early on it didn't really you know, it was a later influx. So all I'm trying to say is that Roman and Greek culture was taught all the way through Europe. West Africa and Central Africa never had an empire that went all the way through the region to unify all of their common knowledge. But there is a commonality of knowledge, just not as strong as the European commonality. You get what I'm saying? Hope?
Yeah, man.
Cool, man. Cool. Yeah, Hope, I was curious. You had expressed some skepticism about some of the ideas I was talking about when I first started with these sessions. How are you feeling about the ideas now? Do you still feel any kind of real skepticism about the things I'm saying, or?
No, I don't. I wasn't skeptical. I just didn't know where you were coming from, and so as I've been hearing you out, and you're sort of laying the building blocks in place, it begins to make more sense. I wasn't skeptical. It was just like an interesting sort of like, well, for my like limited point of view, a twist on everything I already think I know. So, and then you like added a whole other tradition and set of beliefs to it and had them linked together in a way that makes sense. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, I got to tell you, everything that is interesting about what you're hearing me say is all stuff that I discovered back in the 90s as I was doing this research. You know what I'm saying? This is not something that I'm making or I created. You know, just like the cats in West and Central Africa who sculpted the African art that has been so influential in global culture. They would say that they would never say they created those sculptures. They would say that I found them in the woods, I found them in the forest. Look at what the creator created. Look at what this angel created. Look at what this ancestor created that I found in the forest that was given to me as a gift. And this insight into our culture, I felt was given to me as a gift when I took the time to really embrace African traditional culture. African traditional culture gave me ideas, concepts, and insights that kind of made all the other cultures around the world make sense to me for the first time.
Yeah.
And the freeing thing, the thing that I feel was different about Sub-Saharan African culture compared to all the other cultures I had studied before it, was this concept of it's all good. This concept of the nature of reality is not only is it good, but it's impossible to say something that could even insult it. You know what I'm saying? that even your hardest insult, you know, even when you say something is so irredeemably bad that it's just bad, African, particularly Sub-Saharan African culture shows you over and over again that the very word bad is nothing more than a different type of compliment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, cool.
You know, Trump is a bad motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? you know, and that's about as bad as Trump could ever get. You know what I'm saying? So that one change makes everything else in our culture you start to realize we have so many different names for something because of how it's supposed to be ordered. You know, they talk about the living word, the word of God. The Bible just means library. The word of God is every word. In fact, it isn't even words alone. The word was light. So light itself is the first language of God if you're going to follow the Bible. So therefore, we are the living light. And in fact, we are. We glow infrared light. And not only that, the light we see is a language. And because it's a language, we should acknowledge the fact that we had to learn to see, and that everything we are seeing speaks a language that we had to learn. So everything we're seeing is expressing itself intelligently to us.
Yeah.
So our distinction about even something like intelligence is bullshit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The only reason why I treat you different than I treat a dog or I treat the TV is because you're a human being. We have a culture. We have a way of treating each other. And because I'm a human being, I treat the TV like a TV, not saying that the TV is less intelligent than me, not saying that the TV is less alive than me, not saying that the TV is anything less or more than me. It's just that it is specifically a TV, and I am a person, and I do with that TV what I do with the TV. So many of the arguments in our culture are about trying to show why we are better than the things around us. That's why we can use the things around us. So many of the arguments in our culture are about giving us license to do things we could do anyway, and license to do things we don't want to do and shouldn't do, like fuck with each other's license. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, basically, we are intelligent things made up of intelligent things. And all the things we're made of, from the atoms to the molecules to the cells to our organs to our body to our family to our community to our nation to the world, is all, each on every one at each and every scale, are doing intelligently and exactly what the fuck they want to do with complete free will, and everybody is somehow, for most of the time, fucking happy. And even when we're fucking depressed, we could sing it out with the blues and enjoy the horrors of this heaven we live in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, that's what I love about the African American soul. That's why I'm fighting European supremacy. Because we are not peons, and neither is any of the things we use, any of the things we interact with, any of the animals around us, any of the plants around us. All of this stuff is just as intelligent as we can or will ever be. And all of it is an expression of the intelligence that existed here long before life got here, is expressed by life like it is expressed by everything else, and will continue to be expressed after each and every one of us is dead and gone. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing but intelligent, beautiful, divine spirits doing freely what they want to do, and somehow serving each other so that all of us on every scale of existence are freely doing what we want to do. And it's only in our stupid community that we hire people to be police so that they can abuse people to keep people from abusing people. You know what I'm saying?
Word.
You know, But it is what it is. Ogun likes to abuse people. And then he likes to abuse the abuser. And then he likes to abuse himself. You can't stop these angels from doing what these angels do. You know what I'm saying?
I dig it. Somebody else asked a question.
It is supposed to be a cipher. I'm not out here to give a speech. Hey, what up, Jody?
Hey, what's up, so happy 420.
Yo, big up, big up.
Hey, Jody.
Hey, Hope, what's up?
Kaya. Kaya, yay.
Hey, Jody.
Hi. So, I was wondering, how do you feel, or what is your take on the protesters in, where is it, in Michigan?
Yeah, I saw on Facebook a picture of 1918 with the same cats outside protesting, having to wear a mask. We are so on beat right now. We are right at the Gilded Age, 1920. I mean, it's the same shit, you know? I mean, you have Ford as Mark Zuckerberg, and you have Carnegie as, I mean, it's the same motherfucking shit, you know?
You mean history repeating itself?
Yeah, it is an exact repetition, but like the quote I said, it sure does rhyme. You know what I'm saying? A pandemic, 2020, white folk have two groups. One that looks at and observes and makes reasonable predictions of what occurs in nature based on their observations. And then the white folks that read a Bible and feel that's the only, read one book out the library and feel that's the only book out the library they need to live their lives.
I wonder if it's just simply generational, you know, like, you know, we have these stock market crashes and upheavals, you know, every 75 years, which is basically a lifetime. So it's just, you know, you need to have the people who go through it, and then, you know, maybe you can teach their children and maybe the grandchildren, and then it gets one generation further, and it's just far enough away where people start trying to revise history and say, well, that didn't even happen, or, you know, that was nonsense and it has nothing to do with now. And it's like, well, you know, see, like, our history just continues to repeat itself because it's human nature.
Well, not all cultures have specifically looped themselves in history like our culture has.
Okay.
And yes, our culture is on the spectrum of human nature, but everything's on the spectrum of human nature. Human nature is everything we've expressed and everything we could potentially express. We have a huge spectrum, but there's a reason why we consistently are repeating the same things. It has to do with the resistance to change, the resistance to digest the emotional history that made this country. See, in 1865, there was a bloody war over the nature of the humanity of people who look like me. Then in 1965, there had to be a culturally violent confrontation, once again, to decide the citizenship, the legal citizenship of people that look like me. The pandemic is just I don't know why. It's a fluke that it comes at the same time early into the turn of the century. But what you're saying generationally is really true. The people that fought for the Union were morally compelled because they could not see themselves living in a civilization that was allowing the crimes against humanity, the crimes against the morality of the very book that the whole nation went to every Sunday to study and worship. A book that persistently says that God will punish a community that enslaves another community. That God chooses the community that's enslaved and curses the community that enslaves them. Reading that every Sunday and still persistently writing law after law to keep one part of their community enslaved. They could not stand it anymore. They went to war to stop it. And then after the war, when there could have been real reconciliation, where there could have been real acknowledgement, where we could have understood concentration camps were not something that the human condition can stomach. Instead, we embraced the Southern apologists' stories and narratives that the South gave us. Instead, we had people in New York writing songs like Dixieland because of their hatred of Black folk. Now, all you got to do is look at 1865 and see how much y'all wanted to reconciliate, how much you wanted to get right with God, how much you wanted to acknowledge the book that you all say drove your morality while you sinned in the face of it. And then not being able to deal with that after the war was won. And spending the next 100 years subjugating, again, the very same people that you had done this horrible crime to for centuries. As a people, y'all chose this. Right up into the 1960s, you see the riots in Brooklyn about Black folk moving in. I tell you, man, to have the sympathy you have for the Jews and still look at George Washington as being a national hero. George Washington was the Hitler that won. We went off and fought Hitler, and then y'all still, after fighting Hitler, pouring all that blood on the fact that European supremacy and the wiping out of other peoples was not something the human condition can stomach. You still had no problems putting us in ghettos in the 60s. Ghettos, and you called them ghettos. How could you call them ghettos after fighting Hitler? And what's deep is that you had people like Moses giving us the promised land of the ghettos. Moses putting us in those killing fields so that we could give birth to a generation that would be called super predators and hunted in the street for 20 years while we produce the culture the whole world embraces, while not being able to go to art school because our work looked like graffiti and no art schools would, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I look at these cats wearing a mask and it's 1919 all over again because we still have the same racist, horrible, sad, tolerance for our historical crimes against humanity. And I say "are" because I'm the child of both the slave master and the slave, like most people my skin tone are in this country. So we are just as European as you. Accept us as a European, as a white guy just like you. And as a white guy just like you, there is nothing heroic about the European narrative in world history. And there's nothing more heroic than the African American narrative in world history. And I'm not saying that based on anything other than the human condition as it's represented in the Bible, in the Quran, in Buddha's teaching, in Confucius's teaching, in Quetzalcoatl's teaching, in Western Central African teaching. The human condition is specific and it's consistent. We don't like violence. And we shouldn't organize to wipe other people off the face of the earth. Definitely not in the name of God. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, we're in a very harsh song right now. And if you remember, the way the song went was by the 1930s. Hitler I wonder if it'll be Germany or Russia or the United States that'll give birth to that dictator again. You know what I'm saying? You're worried about a pandemic. Hitler in the hands of Germany, Russia, or the United States, he'll sterilize the world by the 2050s. Just like y'all predicted. You know, the revelation everybody's been waiting for, which ain't got nothing about having an insight and everything about the fire next time, right? I am hoping through SCOOL that the fire next time will be the cool insight of soul's inner sense. Because in a sense, we're all innocent of this shit. We all just inherited it. We all just got here. We all just new to the song. And we all can change that song. We're culture soldiers. But first to change it, you gotta see the song that's being sung. You know what I'm saying? Anybody out there got anything to say? Anybody's popping off? Anything? Anyone? Comments, questions? You know? Come on, that was a little heavy shit. Somebody's got to say something, you know?
You got the mic. Run with it.
Yeah, I do like a mic. Been waiting for the mic for a long time. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn that never got his time on the mic. They don't run me out of Bucktown. Now I'm in the Boogie Down, but it's all right. I've always gotten around town. Yes, indeed. I got my 3 sacraments with me. Fanta, because it ain't to make you go back. Fuck that tobacco. This is Fanta. It's to put you up front. Fanta, Kaya, and spirits. Life is good. Hey, Jody, you got a little Kaya burning? How you living?
I'm living large. Got my own.
Thanks, Jordan. I was asking Jody, but I'm glad you living good. I know how you do. Jordan be about it. Yeah, there you go. Light up, Jody. Yeah, it's 420, baby. Sacraments. Bless your lungs. You know? Invite the spirits in. You know? I can't hear you, Jody. You got to take the mute off.
Oh.
There you go.
What is your take on the future and the future when it comes to herb? I mean, in terms
It
of the
breaks my
law.
heart, the future when it comes to herb. You see, the thing about European culture, particularly United States culture, is that all of our medicines come from herbs. We take chemically processed, man-produced chemicals that are basically reverse engineered herbs. And as a result, we don't get the benefit of a herb that is less likely to have toxic effects than the chemically produced molecule that we think does what the herb is actively doing in us. And not only that, we don't get the blessing of this parent of ours, of this spirit, of this living, intelligent being that, with the intelligence of its expression, with the intelligence of its ability to survive, with the intelligence of its ability to live and be happy like we are, is able to make something within itself for its own reasons. Maybe, who knows what those reasons are? It could be that it knows that by making molecules that will heal problems that it somehow senses within us. These are organisms that speak a chemical language that is far deeper and far older than the chemical language our bodies make us aware of. And now that we're using tools to understand these molecular languages, we are recognizing that plants are far more sophisticated than we think they are. And they are these incredibly intelligent molecule designers that know specifically how to interact with the very animals that are trying to kill it, trying to eat it alive, know specifically how to interact with those animals in ways that frees them of their hardship, frees them of their pain, frees them of their ailments, and lengthens their life. Man, what does our European American culture respond with? Well, you can't make money off a plant. Anybody could buy a plant. Farmers sell plants. They're cheap. How can I get the most money off of the people who are in pain? Well, I will design a molecule that does something similar to what the plant does, because I figured out chemically how to put it together, but I don't really know whether it's the molecule that has that effect, but it has an effect, and I don't know what else is going on, but whatever, it's enough that I am going to be able to now sell this molecule, aspirin. Aspirin is a molecule that's found in the bark of a tree. But the reason why we don't have that bark of that tree in our supermarket so that you could buy the bark of that tree and chew on the bark of that tree when you have a headache is because the bark of that tree would have been cheap and all the money would have gone to where the tree is grown. So instead, our brilliant capitalist system says it's much more better, you make much more money if you design the molecule chemically, produce it chemically, and sell that pill instead of sell the bark. That way, we get all the money. We've been separated from nature in such a way that we don't recognize what's natural anymore. You know, I would love it if I walked into our supermarkets and there was as many different types of herbs as there are different types of yogurts. You know what I'm saying? As many different types of herbs as there's different types of cereal. I mean, we have maybe 100 brands of cereal that's made out of one herb, corn, period. It's sweetened with corn, It's made with corn, nothing but corn, fructose, and corn. And that's 100 different brands. That's not healthy for us. That's not healthy for the earth. That's not healthy or enjoyable for anyone except for the people who are making money, feeling that they're giving you a diversity of choice by serving you the same crop 100 different ways. Come on, man. You know what I'm saying? The values of this culture place money above good life. And why should you suffer to get money when all you can buy with money is more suffering? Because in order for you to make the money, you have to make money for people who only care about money and don't care about you, and will offer you what's easiest for them to make money off of you. It doesn't matter how many ways they brand it. It's artists that make us think we have a diversity in our supermarkets, not farmers. Farmers grow one crop, artists make it into aisles and aisles of choices. I mean, tell me if I'm lying. Somebody, any statements? You know? There are what, 3 animals in our supermarkets? What if
yes,
we were crazy and ate, 20 different types of animals? You know what I'm saying? Shit, well, I can't even buy a rooster in the supermarket. We only eat female chickens. You know? Only hens. You can't buy a rooster in the supermarket. Why do we have so little diversity and feel we're so free? Feel we have so much? And why is it that that little bit of diversity is forcing us to homogenize the planet and destroy the ecosystem, because the ecosystem needs diversity in order to survive? You know what I'm saying? So we displease ourselves, and then we displease ourselves, and then we displease the planet, all to make money, which is supposed to make us all be able to please ourselves. That's why there's no healthcare. They privatized healthcare. We've been so bullshit by slave-owning thieves.
Yeah, it's like you spend more for a seedless watermelon where you can get, 100 free watermelons from the seeds of the cheaper watermelon.
You could, I have no problem with seedless watermelon. My problem is that there aren't 40 different types of gourd fruit in the supermarket. Watermelon was not the only gourd fruit. And seedless was not the only brand, and seeded was not the only brand. Nature made brands. They were different species. You know what I'm saying? We have been racist in our eating. We have been homogenous in our farming. We have done to nature what European supremacy has done to our culture. We are wiping out whole branches of the tree of life, thinking that we can keep doing this and survive off of 3 or 4 branches that we like to eat. You know? I'm sure the last animals on earth are going to be a cow, a pig, and a chicken if we don't stop the way we're doing things.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
What do you think about meat being off the shelves in the supermarkets soon because of what's going on with like the dairy and the the livestock, the farms.
I already, my thing is like this.
The shortage of food.
You do not deny people freedom, but you do tell people the dangers of what they're engaged in based on observational hypothesis. Evidence-based hypothesis about the possible consequences, the risk assessment of what you're doing is really important to me. From my perspective, anything regarding the immune system, the only way through it is to survive it. Yes, they can come up with a vaccine for coronavirus, like they came up with a vaccine for smallpox. But the problem with vaccination is that it is not a forever cure. As long as some form of that virus exists in some form of the biological life on Earth, that virus has the chance to keep reproducing, keep mutating, and keep finding new environments and new ways to survive. Whether you talk about a virus or whether you talk about humanity, we all do things along the same contract. We're all related to each other. We all have the same characteristics. What you see a virus does is similar to what you see people doing. You know what I'm saying? Because there's only one intelligence going on here. The way we got here was not by quarantining ourselves. The way we got here was by surviving these viruses. And in surviving these viruses have been sculpting our population, just like we sculpt the population of lambs that we domesticate, or the population of pigs that we domesticate. We are sculpted like a farmer does husbandry. Viruses do husbandry with us because of the nature of how they kill. They take advantage of weaknesses that certain groups of us all have in common. Those who had those weaknesses very strongly don't make it through the initiation. Those who have those weaknesses less strongly have a chance. Those who have very little of those weaknesses survive and pass that trait down to their ancestors. Sickle cell is a so-called horrible disease, but sickle cell occurred to fight malaria, because young people born with sickle cell would survive malaria, and people who were not born with sickle cell didn't. So yes, these young people would grow up and have painful, short adult lives, but not die before they could reproduce. And that's how it became a powerful trait in the African community, because basically malaria favored people with sickle cell. Just like we sculpt any of the life forms on Earth, any of the life forms on Earth can also sculpt us. And there are some that can sculpt us much more deeply than we sculpt them. That's why I call plants a parent of ours. And for us to be playing the type of favoritism that we're playing, where we give acres and acres and acres to corn, and the corn is raised all alone, that's a fascist type of farming. And it leads to a fascist marketplace where, other than the art, you have no choice what you eat because the state has determined what you eat. Everybody's afraid of living in a communist country because we'd have just generic food. But the fact is that we have even worse than generic food. We have the same generic food, just packaged and colored differently. You know, sometimes I go in the supermarket and I feel like that movie where they wear the sunglasses and they see that, you know, all of our beautiful, diverse supermarkets are just filled with bland, same old products. Yeah, they live, exactly. Somebody's on it. Yeah, but you know, the bottom line is that we are fooled into thinking that we have freedom. We are fooled into thinking that we have great diversity in our supermarkets, and we're fooled into thinking that you know, we can make small changes to our society and make it sustainable. Our society has been demanding huge changes for a long time in so many ways. And, you know, from what I've seen, the culture soldiers that I've seen at play, very few are willing to really engage, you know, and that's why I'm doing Soul School, because I'm hoping to reveal to you issues that you may feel passionate about and may want to engage. And if you do, give you tools, information, direction to look in, philosophy, concepts, give you tools to go out there and use soul spirit so that you can take souls and use soul spirit to swing soul sway.
Soul sway. So is this pandemic like, and all of us being quarantined at this time with our internet and our lack of diversity, and people kind of some people are enjoying the extra time at home to do things and quiet and introspection. Will this bring about, like, will we think about how we can, like, you know, national health care, a national pay for everyone? Like, do you think this will institute changes?
Well, after the 1919 flu, there was a big push for the unions, and you know, unionization became really important in the United States. I hope we move back towards unions. Unions were the only counterweight to the oligarchy that seems to overwhelm the culture every time we let go of the unions. But more importantly, we have to recognize that for the overwhelming majority of us, the only way we can feed ourselves, house ourselves, and take care of our children is through bartering our time. And I hope that this time during this pandemic, where people don't have to give up 40 hours their week for a moment, they'll recognize that maybe their 40-hour week is worth a lot more than just being able to pay rent, eat, and take care of your children. And maybe people shouldn't have to work for those basic needs. Or if they do have to do any work, it should be a lot less. Basically, if you're spending 40 hours a week in order just to live like a human being in your society, then this is slavery. That's how they controlled slaves. You'll starve if you don't work.
Right.
Are we the same thing? I mean, one thing about this pandemic is that it's made it really clear there are some people that have no place to shelter in place.
Right.
And they're out there in the streets warning all of us that that's how we treat slaves who don't work. That's how we treat slaves that won't give up their time to do exactly what the fuck we say to do, so that we can make money off of you. Because nobody works without somebody making money off of them. There's no reason to put someone to work unless you can make more money than you're paying them. If you are spending your time and you are the one making the most money, it means that you are running your own business and you've moved from being a domesticated pig to a pig seller, because you most likely are making your money and someone else's money too. It's very hard in our society to barter your time in such a way that someone isn't making more money than you off of your time.
Right.
You know? So it is what it is, man. This is the system that we embrace, and we embrace it not because of fact-based issues. We do not embrace the system because of science. I worship reality. Reality is not what's forcing us to be in the capitalist social system we're in. The human condition is not what is forcing us to be in the capitalist social condition we're in with the policies we have. What is forcing us to be in the policies we have to do what we're doing is ancestral, and it was produced completely by culture soldiers just like you and me. And there are a lot of ancestors who had no say in the civilization, in the policies, and the choices that we have, and the choices that have been taken away from us. However, we as culture soldiers, we all have the agency to change the narrative. Now, don't get me wrong, the narrative is perfect as it is, but it's going to change anyway. Why not change it towards something that you're passionate about? Whatever that passion is. Believe me, if that passion exists inside you, just like if, you know, my glands want to ooze some adrenaline, there's a reason why that adrenaline's pumping. There's a reason why you feel passionate about it. There's a reason why you have a battery in your back. There's a reason why things about your society rub you the wrong way. And the reason is because they can change. You know what I'm saying? So we as culture soldiers can change them if we just investigate very deeply what is so perfect about them, what is not obviously there, but has been there, and how we can use all that to change the way people are seeing the world. Because believe me, we have fiat cash. We have fiat money in our pockets. You know what fiat means? Fiat means only by belief does our money have value. It's only because we believe it that these unlimited editions of concentration camp owners and genocidal generals, it's only because we believe in these unlimited prints of these European supremacist criminals. It's only because we believe that they are valuable that we're willing to throw away $1, but kill someone over 1,000 $100 bills, even though those 1,000 $100 bills are really, for all intents, no more valuable than the dollar we're willing to throw away. You know what I'm saying? They're printing this shit out really easy. Machine prints it out. You got to work 40 hours a week to get enough of this make-believe values to do the very real values of feeding your face, feeding your family, and giving yourself shelter.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So artists run the world. It's just they're called bankers. You know what I'm saying? Any comments, any issues? Well, there's only 15 minutes left. I'm open for a Q&A. If not, maybe I'll call it a little early today. We kind of went in.
How are you doing these days, Soul? How are you?
Oh, I'm blessed. Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
We all are. To be
I
here.
don't see how you have any choice. Perfection is unescapable. It's a little messy, a little awkward sometimes, but for the most part, perfection changes with grace. Even when maintaining it is such a messy job.
Nice.
Yeah. How about you all? How have you all been enjoying things? I know, Jody, you're usually up and go, all one thing to the next from the moment you walk out of bed to the little bit of time you get to back to the bed. What has it been like being able to spend the day, not having to have a whip crack over you and doing what you want to do as you want to do it?
It actually feels kind of great in terms of that regard. Like, I mean, I don't miss my day job at all. I mean, I miss the money, but that's it, Maybe one or two people, and that's it. Yeah, I miss my friends, like, more than anything, and my family,
Yeah, that's why I know that if they were to give everybody the right to have food, shelter, and clothing, and everybody, no matter who you were, you had an apartment for yourself, you would have enough food for yourself, enough clothing for yourself, all your medical needs. If everybody was guaranteed that as a part of our society, the notion of our popular notion is that people wouldn't work. But I think people would work. I think that it's part of the human condition to want to work with people, doing something cooperative and giving a service to folks, and to develop long-term relationships in the context of giving that service. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think we're in a moment of reset, and I think that I don't know. I'm really curious how we're gonna bounce back.
Jody?
I think artists might be okay, but are you hearing me?
I think Jill was trying to say something to you.
Yeah, you said that you're not doing the 40-hour work week right now, and you're feeling good. But you did go out, from what I remember, and get on your bike and ride for miles to go get fabric to make masks for people. And I don't know if you charged for the masks. You had to pay for the fabric and the time to do it, or maybe we have the time. And then you gave them out. So that was working hard.
Exactly.
It was cooperatively. It was community.
Yeah, I got to be more involved in my own community rather than working for the man. Like, so I think definitely the 40-hour work week. I made myself busy. Like, I'm actually very, like, I haven't had time to do my own art so much, which is actually, like, I didn't expect that. But, because sometimes I just want to sleep in and catch up on sleep and talk to
Good.
I think that makes perfect sense, Jody, and that's my point. I think that someone like you, even if we gave you everything you ever wanted, you would still work hard and try to be a service to your community. And you would really hate it if all you had to do all day was sit at home and watch TV. You know what I'm saying? That's not something that is desirable to you. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing, is that the German Nazis used to put up in the concentration camps, Arbeit macht frei, which meant Work makes you free. And it was a horrible statement, basically feeling that they were blessing the concentration camp prisoners by making them work. Because when they were out in society, they didn't work. They just sat around and read their holy books and prayed all the time and made all their money getting interest off of good German people. Now they are going into the concentration camps and they're going to actually work, and the work will give them the freedom that they really deserve, the freedom that they really should value. And my thing is like, for folks like you, working is a blessing. For other folks, sitting at home and studying, whether it's sacred books and prayers or Game Boy and TV shows, whatever activity they want to spend their daily life doing, from my perspective, being able to do that and still be seen as a valuable person, as a good human being, is the most powerful thing our society could do for the individual. So that Jody, with her hard work ethic, doesn't feel like she's better or worse than somebody that sits at home with a so-called low work ethic. The fact of the matter is that just to exist is work. I saw this show the other day where they were measuring the calories people burn in a day, and they went to the so-called hunter-gatherer tribe to see how our ancestors may have burnt calories. So they measured the calories he burnt in a day and what he did in the day. And he walked about 9 miles up and down hills and mountains and whatnot all day long, just working, moving. And then they measured some fat guy sitting in front of his computer every day. And they measure how many calories both people burned. And to their surprise, they both burned the same amount of calories. There's something about our body that regardless of what activity we involve ourselves every day in, our bodies always try to spend the same amount of energy. So if you're sitting at home watching the TV, you are working because your brain is consuming those calories, just like the person who's moving around all day doing physical labor. So all of our attitudes about which is more valuable, about which should be paid more. And it's so funny because, you know, we, in some contexts, we pay the person who sits around and thinks all day lots of money, a CEO. In other contexts, the person who's working hard doing physical labor all day gets paid a lot of money, you know, a football or a basketball star. You know what I'm saying? In other cases, that's working all day gets paid minimum wage. Even though if he doesn't do his work, the society can't eat. And then the other guy, because of how he was born, he got a inheritance, and from the day he's born to the day he dies, he could just sit at home and not ever have to work, and enjoys doing it. Whereas the other guy in the ghetto, who's gets paid very little, but it's hated for the fact that he doesn't want to work and he's cool with being on welfare. They're arbitrary values that aren't based on reality. They're values that we use to control one another and, for the most part, hurt each other. I worship reality. And in reality, we are all perfect human beings doing almost the perfectly same thing. However, we're trying to be as diverse about it as possible. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I mean, this is what Soul Schools is about. You know, 4 more minutes. I'm out of energy. Enough respect, everybody. Enough love.
Thanks, Soul.
Speak to y'all some other time. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this next week. I might have to stop. We'll see.
What do you mean? You're gonna stop?
I might have to. I don't have internet access. All right, y'all.
We can't stop this. We love this. And you gotta work
Thanks, y'all. For real.
Let us donate.
Thanks,
Get 'em out.
Soul.
Enough respect, everybody. Peace.
All right.
Yeah.
Ta-da.